full day of Penn State football distilled down into 50-ish minutes of high-quality talk about Penn State football. I'm Thomas Frank Carr. BWI is live. Fitz and Bauer with me. We were at Penn State Media Day and open practice yesterday. We're bringing you our observations of all of that stuff and much, much more. Guys, you dry off after yesterday. Open practice got interrupted by a monsoon in the middle of it, but everyone get home safe and dry. Fitz, how's everything going with you today?
It's going great. That was wicked, man. Just out of nowhere. Well, not really out of nowhere. We heard the lightning when we were in the parking lot, and we're like, these guys are still outside. That's an interesting choice. So I don't know if the meteorology department's still in summer break or not, but that came roaring through there. It was actually fun. I mean, we'll talk about this in a second, but got to see some kickers in some pressure situations, and just like, it was torrential downpours there. Whisked them inside for a viewing experience, unlike any other, which is 15 minutes of turnover drills, essentially. So check out our notes on the site. There's a lot going on right now at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Nate, as I talked about on the stand-up yesterday, ton of notes this weekend from Penn State's first week of practice. You're not going to find anything like this anywhere else, so check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
Yeah, and we're going to be dipping our toe into some of that. We're also going to be getting into our practice observations, but also read and react. Between the lines, getting my segments mixed up. Between the lines, James Franklin's press conference. We're going to be getting in between what he said and what he's actually saying later in the show. And, of course, your questions coming up on the show as well. If you throw them in the chat, we're going to have an impromptu mailbag again today on the show. So you are going to be the star of the final segment on the BWI Live Show. But we do have a special recruiting mailbag coming up on Wednesday's show. We're flipping the recruiting show and the football show again this week with all the information coming out of the weekend. So make sure you tune in for that on Wednesday. We'll be getting the full and proper mailbag from BlueWhiteIllustrated.com for a recruiting special show. But before we get to anything else today, our newest sponsor on the show here, I want to invite them in, and that is alumlodge.com. Alum Lodge, if you are like me and you've purchased a house recently, there's still that like addiction of going through and looking at houses. I love looking at houses. I love looking at this stuff. And if you want to come to a Penn State football game and you want to live it up, like you're spending a lot of money to come in for the weekend, why not get a really nice rental house in the area? At Alum Lodge, they strive to deliver customized service that meets the unique needs of each guest stay, so they'll return time and time again for all the games coming up this fall. They have a concierge service for guests to feel cared for in Happy Valley, and they have a bunch of different properties, but right now there's only one available because they've been so popular. So make sure you go check out right now, as we're looking at the website, alumlodge.com. They have some properties in Park Forest. They have some in Tofttrees. And this one, I believe this is the one in Bellefonte where they get 3-bed, 1.5 bath. And you can see it's a horse farm. So if you want to go hang out with some horses and have a pool outside the Penn State football games, you can check it out. It is a beautiful property with all the things that you're going to want to take your stay in Happy Valley to the next level. So check it out. Again, alumlodge.com. Happy to have them on the show. So don't wait, alumlodge.com, and you can call them 814-424-3266. But the news today coming out of Penn State camp, the Penn State football news, we have a news and roster update. Smith Vilbert, done for the season. He's out for the year. Nate, do you want to take us and lead us off into what's going on with this situation, which broke while we were at Media Day yesterday?
He's out for the season. I'm not sure. I'm not sure how much farther we can take it. It's Smith is a guy who I think Penn State has been trying to coax into, developing a little bit more. We're all going to talk about it. The Outback Bowl performance in 2021. Right, was kind of what put him on the map a little bit, I think, in the consciousness of Penn State fans. And there were expectations because of that, right, that led into 2022 that never really materialized. It's a setback for him. Obviously, Penn State confirmed that he was out due to injury, for the season. So it's a tough loss for him, but I'm not sure. I want to be sure that we properly put it into context for what it means for Penn State football, which is, the like sixth or seventh safety net, I would say, is no longer there. But certainly in terms of Penn State's top rotation and who they're going to use there at defensive end, the 5 or 6 guys that they're going to use there are all intact and healthy. So,
yeah, and I think that's a really good point to put out there. Fitz, you want to follow up with that?
Yeah, I think it's important to note, like last year with him being in and out of practice, with him being that was a separate issue. That was a an off-field distraction type issue. This is a legitimate injury. Like, don't come back and say that the same thing's happening again. This is a legitimate injury. It's going to cost him his season. So I think even though it sounds stupid to lay it out like that, like people are going to say, well, this is just a cover up. The kid's actually hurt. So, and that's unfortunate. We've been talking about that first 5 at defensive end for a reason. Like, those guys were putting themselves on another level. Vilbert missed the spring due to an injury. So like, this is something that has come along for the ride. So having said that, it doesn't really change all that much. Like, you look at what Penn State has at defensive end, they're very strong there, very strong, probably the strongest position group on the roster. 3 starters in Chop, Adisa, and Nittany Dennis Sutton. And then like the 4 and 5, those guys are pretty good too. Like Amin Vanover showed last year that he could, hold up in that situation. We had questions about him throughout his career, whether he'd be an interior guy, but it seems like he is stuck on that edge. The odds weren't great that he was going to do that, but he seemed to do that. And then Zariah Fisher, like I think all you got to look at was Zariah Fisher is last year. Like, Zariah Fisher at this time last year was out for the season. He ended up coming back and getting in there and getting some reps at the end of the year. So he has worked his way back into that conversation. I think Amin's going to be the 4th guy. So you're talking about a 2 deep there. And then I think Zariah will play. So I think those 5 guys are going to play. And then you have that gap. Vilbert would have fit in that little gap. Nate mentioned the Outback Bowl. I hate bringing out the Outback Bowl. The stat book looks different than the tape on that one. Yeah. Unfortunately, that's really cool that he got that record and everything like that. But it's not, if you were going to use that as your argument for Smith Vilbert, that argument falls apart pretty quick when you put in the tape. So tremendous physical presence and everything like that. But at the same time, behind those other guys. Having said that, there's still a gap there because you've got Joseph Mupoy, Mason Robinson. You've got some Jameel Lyons in there as well. That's a big jump for those guys. So I don't think you're going to be relying on those guys, those freshmen, to come in and maybe get some mop up work here and there. But those guys I think are still developmental prospects. Lyons probably the closest to go, but he's one of those guys that's got to focus on things outside of football and get him in that direction, just pointed in the right direction to get him started in his career. So, it doesn't change much for the outlook for 2023. It's unfortunate when anybody goes down for a season-ending injury. But in terms of positions, I hate to say this, if you can afford to lose anybody anywhere, be it the 6th defensive end. I think that's the way to go for it.
I want to circle back quickly to the Zariah Fisher angle of this. I mean, I know last year you were pounding the drum for this is crazy that Zariah Fisher is back so quickly. But like, how underrated is that storyline that not only he came back last year, but he's been, he just the curve of how quickly he's gotten back to what seems like full strength after that injury last spring. How much of an underrated storyline is that? And how much does that, I think, push up the competition at defensive end, where you've got so many talented players and you have that ability now to have a guy that can, be that 5th, 6th guy?
Well, the injury happening in the spring, no injury is a blessing, but the timing on that, I think, can't be denied. That's a long way. It's been a long time since he was injured. So for him to work back in through the end of the season, well, I don't want to say it was a miracle, but it was a testament to the work that he put in. That's going to tell you a little bit about his makeup. That's going to tell you a little bit about what he could become as a player. And he's still a 5th defensive end. Let's keep our expectations in check here. But at that position, that's pretty good. You can be a pretty good defensive end and be the 5th defensive end on Penn State's roster. So I think he's going to push Vanover. I think there will be situations where you see him out there and you're going to think, why is Penn State rolling 5 defensive ends when they could be, just tightening that rotation and going with 3 guys? So I think think Fisher's good enough. Like, I think that's where the bar is at that position. Deion Barnes, Torrance Brown are working that group hard, and there are very high expectations for that position. I think he can hang, and I think that's a sort of a testament to the work that he's put in. So you look at that's what's kind of difficult about that quote unquote battle for that fourth spot is he and Vanover are different, like very different. Yep. Vanover is maybe more of a 5-tech that can hold up the edge, play against the run, bigger guy. If you're ever around Amin Vanover, his hands are huge. Like he's what Franklin was talking about when he was talking about what Steven Gonzalez early in his tenure. Big head, big features, big hands, like big everything. Like Vanover is just absolutely massive, and for him to stick at defensive end, like you got to have some pretty good athleticism to do that at that size where he could. Like, I think there's probably a universe where he's 310 pounds and playing in the interior. Like that's the kind of body type that he could have. But he's shown that he can stick at the edge. So I think it's one of those exciting things. I mean, we talked about underrated position battles, under the radar position battles on the site this weekend. That was not one that made the cut, but like you're seeing battles, like legitimate battles down the roster, down the depth chart. And I think that was a big theme coming out of media day was just how deep this team is at several different positions. Still holes, still places they need to address in August, still things that they need to work on to iron out some depth in some other positions. But you're looking at this roster and saying, yeah, they could go 4 deep here. They could go 3 deep here, just all over the place. So I think that's one of the things that pops out in defensive end, probably right at the forefront of that discussion.
We got some great questions flowing in for the chat, so we'll be getting those to the during the BWI mailbag. Thanks to everybody who's putting those in. We're not ignoring you. I just want to make sure that we save those for that juicy, meaty part for the end. We'll be getting into those in just a little bit. But Nate, I want to come to you because the other thing that I think is maybe the most shocking from this past weekend to me, for Penn State and all of their secrecy, all of their tight photos, all of their, hey, don't report on X, Y, or Z if like open practice rules and things for us, they're opening up a practice to the public coming up next weekend. So Can you explain the story that we got from how this all came to be and what fans should expect next Saturday, and give us the details so if people are interested in going, they can partake in this practice. Because James Franklin also set the whole thing up with, hey, there's going to be some ground rules, and I was like, oh, this is going to be fascinating how this goes. Yeah.
So first of all, I'm gonna redirect the news dump part of that to Sean. He can handle it. He can look for it as I spend the next 5 minutes talking about the things that I think are funny about this, which is mostly that. So they're gonna have an open practice, and the public is invited. Obviously, it is a perk for Happy Valley United NIL members, right? There's going to be a pre-practice autograph signing, which given the fact that Nick Singleton and Abdul Carter were in Philly, in February, I think it was, signing autographs at $50 per is probably a pretty good deal, right? For Penn State fans that want to get up close and personal with some of those guys. So yes, it does seem out of the norm. There were a few points that I think are somewhat funny, and maybe Fitz can attest to this. One being James saying that he didn't always have coordinators that were comfortable with it. As though this was something he's been dying to do this. He's been dying to let everyone in and watch practice. But you know what? Joe Moorhead just couldn't come around to it. Like that wasn't his cup of tea to open up.
This is all Brent Pry's fault. Like, let's just call it what it is.
Joe Moorhead is. I mean,
correct.
The guy coaching in Sanix is the guy that was holding this back, I'm sure.
Yes. So that's the first funny part. The second thing that is kind of humorous is within the this is a media day press conference, and he's already chiding the media for breaking rules that they haven't yet established, right? Like, hey, right. It's almost like a mob threat. Like I would hate for something to happen to you guys where we weren't able to do this in the future. We really want to do this, but we're asking for a few ground rules. It's the same as the Eagles and the Pittsburgh Steelers in their preseason practice that they ask of their media. So please, abide by these rules. Look, whatever the rules are, we're going to follow them. Right. Like, it's fine. You appreciate the access, especially from the perspective of, I would say, Fitz and myself, where like when Joe Paterno was the coach of Penn State, which was the first 4 or 5 years of my career doing this, it was Live for Life was your media availability, then preseason media day, and then the first press conference before the first game of the season. Like those were the 3 media opportunities that you had that kind of carried you through the summer. It's so much more now. I mean, we're there once a week, which is great. Certainly there are some other programs that do more, but it's a good thing to open this access, I think, a little bit and let people see what Penn State football has going on. So it's interesting, and we'll see how it goes. And hopefully there is some like impression to glean from it, though I really doubt that, right? They're not gonna there will not be any
it's not a full scrimmage. They're not going to be running the things they're running during the first week of the game, for sure.
Correct.
So Fitz, for fans that, with all that known, and it almost sounds like they're going to be confiscating everyone's cell phone by some of the things that I read in the in the release. What do you have for us in terms of, like, as he said, the news dump part, where the nuts and bolts of what fans need to know about what's coming up next Saturday?
In terms of what fans need to know, I'm not sure. This is something that James Franklin's wanted to do for a while. It's more of a community outreach thing than anything. Like it's been something that, as Nate said, he's wanted to do for a while. What's been holding that up, I don't know. But I think this is going to be a laid back look into it. They're bringing bleachers in. They're doing all these kind of stuff. At least that was the plan. It's been kind of back and forth. The first one said Lash. I think James said Beaver Stadium. I've heard Lash. Irrelevant. But it's a cool opportunity to watch practice and also understand that not as much goes on at practice as you think. Like, that was always one of the things that players would tell me. It's like, what are you looking for out of this? Like, do we come in, do our stuff and get out of there? Coaches might tell you different on certain days, but I don't think this is going to be one of these days. I don't think it's going to be a ton of scrimmaging. I don't think that, but it's a Saturday evening practice, almost like a fan fest, I would say. Like, that's kind of what they're working around. I think Michigan's done this for years, and they've even traveled to do it. And I think that's the way you're looking into it. And James is looking for a way to incentivize people to give for NIL. Like, this is kind of what it comes back to. Get those people around the program. And I think that's one thing that you look at the Penn State program, the type of kid that they recruit. And I say kid loosely, obviously, but you're like, if you spend time around these guys, you're going to smile. You're going to feel good, and you're going to feel better about, if you choose to donate to Happy Valley United and do the NIL, I think you're going to feel better about where your money is going if you spend some time around these guys and people that have come out and done NIL events. I know there was, a group that came in around the Elite 11, got to hang out with Nittany and Zane Durant and Trey Wallace and a bunch of these guys, just over the moon at the access that they got and the accessibility to the players and how the players reacted, because this is a changing world in terms of NIL, but at the same time, it's not all bad. Like, it's not this NIL evil stuff. That is not how this kind of works. So I think that this is sort of a fan fest to get people in and see and get them around the Happy Valley United people and just kind of bring people together while others are looking for a way to, sort of, I don't want to say dissolve this or part their ways from it, but like this, I think it's trying to show that this can be a good for everybody.
Yeah. Just to back up kind of something that you mentioned there, watching Nittany in person, either talking to him or at that event where you saw him kind of holding court, there are a few guys that I feel like have that, like, ooze the superstar of, he was just very, very confident, very casual, very comfortable being in front of all these people that just want to be around him. He's got a magnetic personality. So it's also a good thing for these guys in terms of if they have a future in the NFL, if they have a future in public speaking or any of these things, another way for them to help with all of those things and to exhibit all of those skills for Penn State football fans. Speaking of, if you've already booked your and Nate, I'm going to get to you in just 1 second. I just want to make sure.
Go ahead.
We got our fans their game accommodations earlier with Alum Lodge. Now we need to get them to the game with Tixman Jim. Join the most exciting atmosphere in college football with Tixman Jim. If you're looking for a reliable source of Penn State football tickets, Jim at TixmanJim.com, formerly PSUTixman.com, has been running his ticket exchange in Wilmington, Delaware for over 25 years. Every buyer handled with courtesy and respect, and with online transactions, that's super important. Every ticket purchase is guaranteed, and most every ticket is transferred through your Ticketmaster email address. Proceeds are used to fund the PSU AA Chapter Scholarship Fund and the PSU Levi Lamb Fund for athletic scholarships. Get your home opener West Virginia tickets, the Stripe Out, the White Out. Your tickets there. Homecoming. There is a jam-packed primetime schedule this year. The Michigan Stripe Out, I know it's at noon. That's a primetime game. All of them at TixmanJim.com. Again, www.tixmanjim.com or call 302-521-8380. And you thought me making this graphic this morning for fans, I would have put his phone number on there. Yeah, well, you win some, you lose some. 302-521-8380. Nate, I want to get back to you. I interrupted you from saying there.
No, just very briefly, because I actually looked up the information so that people know. 5:35 to 6:20 outside Haluba Hall. There will be an autograph session, and that is exclusively for Happy Valley United members. And then 6:30, the gates open. Practices at 7 o'clock. So it'll be outside. I mean, without rain, it'll be on the Lash practice fields, of which there are 3. So you can. We'll see how this goes. I think it's going to be a little bit of a mess. I'm not sure how they're going to accommodate that type of fan turnout. If there is a big fan turnout, right? People need bathrooms, right? Like
everyone going into the Haluba Hall bathroom is going to be a problem. Fitz, you're on mute. You're on mute, Fitz.
That was not worth me being on there, so that's fine.
Is anyone selling cotton candy? Like, are there hot dogs?
Look, they said food trucks. The release said there's going to be food trucks and stuff like that.
Okay, I'll be there. I'll be there. I expect
the
people
food
to shout
trucks
at
don't
me.
get they don't get a parking ticket that outside of Lash, which is a regular thing for everybody.
The last time they did something like that was at Beaver Stadium in 2021, like the open practice, which was solely open so that recruits could get the first tickets. Because you remember that whole thing, it was like, yes, people were mad they couldn't get tickets. Well, the whole thing was to get recruits there because it was a dead period and they had to buy tickets, free tickets, in order to get there. This is a different setup. I don't really expect recruits to backdoor their way into this one. I mean, some local kids maybe, but not to meet with the staff or anything like that. So, but that was one of my questions, was like, did they had to open it up to everybody to open it up to the Happy Valley United people? And that was not it. They just wanted to do something spread out fan fest type thing. There was another location that didn't work out. So, I mean, it's one of these things that I think that just trying to get out there and do some community outreach at a time when, you're trying to get your work in, obviously, but at the same time, like, you're trying to network and go in the right direction. I'll, go back to NIL and Nate here, but it's one of those things that just kind of, bring that connection between those players and the community a little bit closer.
It's interesting, as James Franklin talked about, going up to New England, spending time with the New England Patriots. This is an NFL model where they open up practice regularly, and he mentioned the Steelers and the Eagles, and Nate brought all that stuff up. But just kind of I think when people think about the NFL model, it's always a negative thing, but there's more transparency in the NFL. There's a little more engagement. There's a little more ability to interact with players. Fitz talked about that earlier in terms of NIL can be a good thing because you can meet these guys. There's more ability for contact, so all that stuff. We're going to see how all this goes on Saturday. Of course, we will be there to cover all of it, and we'll talk about it on the show coming up next Monday. Once again, the recruiting show is going to be on next Wednesday. We're going to flip these so that we can get to all this stuff and recap the weekend with Penn State football being in full fledged. Speaking of, let's talk about Penn State open practice, which yesterday we got to in the late afternoon. I'm going to start with Fitz, selfishly, because I spent my time with the offense, and I want to hear about what was going on with the defense. So, Fitz, you can check out his notes, bluewhiteillustrated.com. Sign up for $1. Last day of that deal. Fitz, what do you want to share with people? What nuggets you want to pull out to give them a little taste of what you saw yesterday?
Well, it's tough to start anywhere but the special teams. That's where we walked in, and they were practicing field goals. Sanders Sahadak, Alex Falcons out there practicing. Tyler Duzansky, the number one snapper, of course, is the battle that everybody's been watching. Myself at the forefront of that. But that's been a worry for Penn State special teams. I don't think it's nailed down yet. You had Sahadak. I guess you could call him, air quotes here, using the first team very loosely. Falcons was kicking, but it's practice. They're charting all these, they're charting all these kicks. They're doing all these things that are going to give them the data that they need for the last week in September, when they'll probably decide who the guy is going to be. But it seemed like Sahadak was hitting the ball well. Falcons was hitting the ball well. I think Sahadak was, he missed one right, but that was pretty much it. I think my takeaway from that was, hey, the talent is there. Like, that's not a question. It's the consistency. It is doing it, under pressure situations. Yesterday, that storm came rolling in. They kept right going. They kept right along going. And that was a distraction. Coaches yelling in your ear, coaches throwing stuff at you, all that kind of stuff. And these guys are going to have to grow up quick. I mean, for all that we talked about Jake Pinniger was not a bad kicker. Like, he obviously was not the best one that's ever come through Penn State. But he had a run last year where he was pretty good. They're going to have to find a guy that can hopefully be at that floor and help you out. Sahadak's got the big leg. Falcons has the experience. Whether you find something that can be consistent out of that, it's hard to say. I just got a question about punting in the chat. We didn't see any of the punting. I don't have anything updated on you or updated for you. I think Riley Thompson's been talked about quite a bit. He's obviously got some more experience than Alex Paqueta. Again, leg talent is there, like baseline level leg talent is there at both positions. It's about consistency, and that's going to be something that plays out over the next 4 weeks. Like that's not something that you could sit here 4 practices in and say, okay, this guy's clearly got the upper hand, because I think Nate, it's going to be like golf. It's going to be a situation where you're going to have an off day, and you're going to have an off day. It's going to be up and down, and things are going to change. You may jockey for that lead. So I think that those guys are going to go back and forth, but it's still a legitimate concern for Penn State. They need to figure out who that guy is and get him comfortable. Figure out kickoffs, figure out all those little things. Stacey Collins, I think, is going to do a fine job in putting that together. But you're not going to have the consistency that you've had at some point. I think that should be the expectation there. So special teams aside, defense, not much to take away from it. Abdul Carter continues to be just an absolute specimen, grabbing one-handed interceptions, doing all that kind of stuff. What I like from Abdul Carter and what we saw on Sunday, right at the front of the line with Curtis Jacobs, yelling at his teammates, yelling at the coaches, the assistants, and everything like that, to get people in the right position. And that's a big step. Abdul, as talented as Abdul was, he's kind of in a shell when he got here, and he's come out a bit. And I think that that's going to help him. And if you're trying to, put him up against the guys that he's been compared to on the pantheon of Penn State linebackers in terms of LeVar, in terms of Micah, like him coming out and being like a loud, aggressive guy, it's going to put him in that direction. Obviously, we're not ready to throw him out there. Still has a lot of improvement left to do as a player, but at the same time, I think it's encouraging to see him take those steps in that direction, because he's a phenomenal physical talent, and if he continues to improve, the sky's the limit for that guy.
So check out the rest of his notes over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. There's some more things that he had to say about the defense that you can check out there. Again, I'm just going to throw this up here because you don't get better than $1. And I know technically it could be free or 50 cents or whatever, but come on, it's $1, $1 US for a month of content. Fall camp sale going on right now. It ends today. So new subscribers, if you want to dip your toe in the water, $1 for 1 month of access, taking you all the way into the regular season, past the first game. So you'll have all of the inside practice notes. Nate put up great notes this weekend talking about what was actually going on. You got a preview of what was going to be talked about on Media Day from Nate on Saturday. So Nate, we're coming back to you.
Yeah.
What did we get on the offensive side of the ball?
Can I interject and loop back to punting just for one moment?
Of course, this is a special teams safe space. I mean, for you guys, not necessarily for me, but for both of you, correct?
It obviously lights our heart ablaze. I think that one of the dynamics that will actually truly go into the punting decision is how bad the misses are, right? Like, what does the catastrophe look like? Truly, because there's a very real possibility that the guy who emerges from this is Gabe Nwosu, for punting specifically, because his misses are not train wrecks. Whereas with Bacchetta, whereas with Riley Thompson, there are occasions where that can be like you cannot afford disasters at that spot, right? I mean, you've seen games that can be swung based on fumbling the snap, what have you, any number of things where a shank.
It's not about the A ball, is what you're saying.
Correct.
Yeah.
It's what else does that look like? So anyway, I digress. Offensively, yesterday I thought was more maybe revealing than I necessarily thought it would be. T. Frank, maybe I don't know. I think you probably agree with that. We saw 4 teams worth of work, right? Like
consistent.
You saw the first team off. You saw literally the first through fourth team offensive lines. Obviously, the quarterbacks are the same. They're all throwing passes. But yeah, it gives you a little bit more of a sense of what Penn State's depth looks like, how things are maybe shaking out on the offensive line. Certainly, the offensive line is going to be interesting, right? Landon Tangwell was not at media day yesterday. We didn't see him at practice, and that's not nothing. if he's not there, this is a kid a guy who came off of an injury last season, and they missed him last year. But you also see how there's positional flexibility is such a big deal for this offensive line to begin with. And this is a situation that kind of plays that out, because yes, JB Nelson is the guy who is already battling Landon Tangwell, but also is potentially the 4th tackle, right?
Yeah.
Like, so they just have a little bit of a finding, what the starting 5 is supposed to look like, but if it doesn't, that impacts what the backups then look like.
Yeah.
So it's I think we got a little better sense of that yesterday. It was good. It was interesting.
But they're sorry, Steve Frank, but they're deeper here than they've been in years, and that's I think that's what you keep coming back to. Now you want as we said with the A ball and punting, you want your top 5 out there, obviously, all the time. But you can move Nelson around. You've got Drew Shelton in there as a 3rd tackle. You've got Venga, who they're very high on as a guard. Like, I would say competing with Sal Worman. Sal started all 13 games. I would expect him to continue to start, but like for a redshirt freshman to be even in the conversation to compete, like, that's good. Now, I do agree with you. Like, you want to keep those guys as healthy as possible, and it will be like a chain, because you're talking about going from JB Nelson as your 4th tackle to a true freshman in Javen Williams as your 4th tackle. So that's going to be like a little bit of a waterfall, but let's appreciate where we've been in terms of watching this offensive line come together. Whereas if you lose a starter, if you lose a 6th man or something like that, you're not toast, but you're in a situation where it's very dicey very quickly, and you have a little bit more room to work. I'm only saying this because I've written a story that'll go up on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com where I talked to Phil Troutwine about this whole situation and where Penn State has been to where they're at now on the offensive line. And I'm glad you guys got more details. You should have sent some of that down to the defensive side of the field, because it's quite different in terms of being illuminated. It's a kind of a really cool transition to watch over the last couple of years.
Yeah, the thing I was looking at outside of that, the receivers and the running backs, I've been trying to follow Nick Singleton's development as a receiver over the last, I'd say, since February. This has been something that I think Penn State fans are really interested in, and I know that dynamic quality he has, getting him in space, trying to find any way to get his hands on the football, that's something that everyone in the Penn State sphere is interested in doing. And watching his progression, I've kind of given my observations and updates throughout all of this, but that was something we focused on. My observations are Penn State practice highlights, which you can check out here on the YouTube channel. I threw them up earlier when we started the segment, but you can get my notes and my thoughts there on that video, which is well worth your time. It's 2 minutes long, and it gets you an insight into what we saw through the lens of the camera. But his hands are getting better. It's just he's not a natural receiver. You saw Jaywan Siders like don't fight the ball. Relax your hands. He's trying so hard all the time. Like he's an intense guy that is, effort is a huge part of his game. And I was talking to Marcus Hagans about hands, like how do you develop good hands? And it's not just repetition. There's a mentality about it as well. He said you got to be arrogant with your hands. And just watching the development of a receiver, even if he's a running back, I think that's a valuable thing for Penn State to see how that's going to be incorporated into the offense. And then the receivers in general. Mike brings this up in the chat. He says, I absolutely love seeing Drew slinging back shoulder throws. Clifford, that he thinks that's something he struggled with last season. And yeah, the timing on back shoulder throws, that is a lot of chemistry. That's a lot of that being arrogant with your hands. I don't know if that's exactly right what he says in the chat about Clifford, but it is something that, when you are good at the back shoulder, you've seen it in the NFL, Aaron Rodgers and Devontae Adams, almost unblockable. And by the way, this was up earlier, but Rick, thank you for the donation to the channel. Appreciate you and everybody else. Rick just didn't have a question. I wanted to get that up for him.
He just wanted to hear us talk about punters, and once we did, that's when he cashed in there. So appreciate it, Rick.
Fitz, you wanted to add on to that?
Not particularly, but I'm gonna make a comment or make a comparison here. Like those guys fighting the ball, like it's not fighting the ball. Like it's just one of those things that it just does not come natural. It's like Nate around the green chipping. Like it's kind of one of those things that you have to get repetition with. But as you mentioned, it's a mindset. You talk to Higgins, he kind of said the same thing. It's not an overnight thing. And I think that's what you have to remember. And also you've got guys, talking about receivers, you've got guys that are, pressing to make plays. And that's, that's not the way to get that done to make yourself a more natural receiver. When you're talking about Caden Saunders, when you're talking about Malik McLean, even a little bit, Malik Mega as well. Those guys working through, I think Clifford's got pretty natural, good hands in that sense. It's probably stereotypes playing into that one, but like, it's one of those things where you're like, if you're pressing too hard to make those catches, you're just going to hurt yourself. So it's about that repetition. It's about getting through there. And I think those guys are coming along. James said, 8 guys, sort of in the mix for the wide receiver spots. When you think who the first 4 are going to be, and then after that it's a mixed bag. Like it's going to be one of those things where it's going to be up and down all throughout camp.
Yeah, and you can check out what we saw BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Last thing that we got from Media Day, and this is just following up on what James Franklin said and what Mike Yursich said, that Jackson Smolik a surprise as far as being a good quarterback when he's on the field, having good awareness. One of the things that I found interesting was, it'll come up here in just a second, they were working on screenplays, and Phil Troutwine is the rusher, and he Dikembe Mutombo's it, and then I just hear somebody in the background say, "Find a way! Figure it out!" And then, of course, on the next time, he gets it over to Caden Saunders. So Jackson Smolik learning in real time in front of us, that third quarterback. I called him a stone cold killer in recruiting, just because, he does. He eventually finds a way. He seems to be one of those guys that's really cool under pressure. So watching him develop in those areas it's interesting. All the focus is on Aller and Perbula to a degree, but then when you've got this other guy who largely forgotten, but you can't forget, because the third quarterback, you never want to get there, but we've seen where Penn State got to the second quarterback who was kind of the third quarterback at one point. Like, it does matter, and watching him progress, I think, needs to get more credit for what he is as a passer.
Well, it's not so much about getting him ready for the game. Like, if he's in the game, you're in trouble. Like, and that's not a slight on Smolik. He's a true freshman. Like, just came in, and the guys ahead of him are competing for that starting job for a reason. But you look back at Taquan Roberson's freshman year, and this was something, when I was at my last place reported on, and it kind of stuck with people. Like, he did not prepare like he was ready to go into the game. He prepared like a scout team quarterback. And that's a mentality that you cannot have as a guy that eventually wants to be a starter. I think Smolik's got that mentality that he's going to, he's going to be 1 snap away or 2 snaps away or whatever. And I think that that's something that really can benefit them. That class they brought in, Roberson and Michael Johnson Jr., and it was pretty evident, not right off the bat, but it was pretty evident, because Johnson made some really good plays in practice, but it was pretty evident that neither of those guys was going to be a long-term solution. I don't really feel that way about Smolik. I know it's only been a spring and a couple of practices, but the way that he's, put himself in that battle, asking questions, going to the whiteboard, still a work in progress in terms of picking up the offense and things like that. But like, those are the guys with the makeup that you want to find. And I think Smolik, very early returns are positive. Don't know that he'll ever be a starter here. Don't know that he'll ever, be a big time guy here, but he has that potential to develop into that guy if that's the way that goes, if that's the way that the path goes.
We've got the BWI mailbag coming up in just 1 second, but a couple things I want to get to. Want to promote what we have coming up this year. So, of course, this week you can talk about what we have coming up. The recruiting show coming up on Wednesday, 10 a.m. regular time. We'll also have KSN on BWI, the Keystone Sports Show that I'm a part of. We're going to be broadcasting that later in the week on Thursday as well. But coming up in the season, we're only a couple weeks away. We are going to be doing a BWI tailgate show in conjunction with Seven Mountains Media that is live outside Beaver Stadium before every home game and in the studio 3 hours before kickoff, before each game. So if you want in-depth analysis and the best pregame content anywhere with myself and former Penn State defensive tackle Aeneas Hawkins, we're going to bring that to you 3 hours before kickoff every Saturday this fall, and a couple Fridays when they play on Friday. We'll be getting the BWI mailbag right after this. Are you a company that is passionate about athletics and wants to tap into the Penn State sports community? Maybe you're a community organization in State College, Center County, Pennsylvania, or even planet Earth. Are you interested in growing your brand and leveraging our YouTube and podcast platform? Or are you just a person that has some money to spend? If you're any of those things, or something I didn't bring up just now, consider advertising on the Blue White Illustrated YouTube show. We have a dedicated and passionate audience that is just waiting to hear from you. Through me, talking about your business on the show. That's how we do it. So if that sounds like something you're interested in, email Michelle DeLee Hamilton at michelle@comanpub.com. That's michelle@comanpub.com. We're waiting to hear from you. Through me, talking about you. Again, that's how we do it. Got so many questions in the chat that unfortunately I know the guys are bummed about this. We're going to be bypassing between the lines today, getting right to the mailbag, answering questions in the chat. So we're going to be getting to these, and I'm going to do a little bit of some behind-the-scenes stuff on air in just 1 second. But I want to get to this one from Joe Tristito. Donates to the channel. My guy, appreciate you. He says, hey, guys, love the show. What about Johnny Dixon's game could help him take a similar leap that Kalen King made last year? What is his ceiling and why? Fitz, we're going to come to you on this one first. What do you think about what Johnny Dixon can do in that role of not Joey Porter Jr., from what we saw with Kalen King last year?
Yeah, he's going to see plenty of action this year. He's going to be targeted with Kalen King on the other side. I think from talking to Johnny, I did a magazine story on him last month, but the awareness of the way that he plays is not going to be the way that he's going to be able to play this year. Like he's been grabby. He's been a guy that's has been, tried to make up with his hands, and that's not how you do it. So I think his footwork has come a long way. His man-to-man skills are pretty good. It's really hard to be a corner like that. And that's the thing, like you're going to be upset at Johnny Dixon from time to time for being a step behind. Like that's part of the position, whatever. But he's a really good football player, really high football IQ. He's a guy that they don't want to take off the field. And he's really come a long way in that spring. Like to see him bounce back, and not bounce back, but to see him reject Storm Duck, like that was the expected competition, and it wasn't even close. Like Dixon was much better than Storm Duck, and Storm Duck eventually found his way to Louisville. He's a talented guy. He's probably a middle round draft pick right now. Like that's something they'll be talking about after the season, but he's got good coverage skills. He's got good man skills.
NFL feet. Right?
Yeah. He's got NFL feet. I would agree with that. It's going to be a situation where they're going to rely on those corners to open up things for the rest of that defense. Like these guys are good man corners. I think Kalen King is an elite man corner. Like he's really, really good. But I think Johnny Dixon not as far behind as you want to say. The funny thing here is I was talking to him about the sacks. Like he had 3.5 sacks, 3 sacks last year. He had more sacks than most of the defensive line, and he's reminded them about that. I think he's rubbing that in Hakeem Beeman's face. That's not something that he practices. That's not like they have some drills where you go after the ball and everything like that, but it's not a situation where he emphasized his blitzing skills. To me, that tells me that, he as a football player, that some of that stuff comes natural to him. And that is amazing when you're talking about a guy that is not asked to blitz, but is still a successful blitzer. That tells you a little bit about the makeup and the actual football skill level that he brings to the table. So I'm excited to see Dixon. I think there's a gap there. I think I'm high on Cam Miller as well, but I think there's a gap there between 1, 2, and then the rest of that group. Still looking for a fourth corner. I'm going to see how Daquan Hardy figures into that. I'm going to see how some of the younger guys figure into that. But right now I expect a lot of Kalen King and a lot of Kalen King and Johnny Dixon right off the bat.
Yeah, and Johnny Dixon, you bring up a great point when it comes to his sacks. And the crazy thing is he did that, and he actually lost his spot at one point on the third down package. So being able to produce at that level, and it just goes to show what are the skills that you can bring to the table, and Manny Diaz will find a way to put them out there on the field.
But I think sorry, but it just came to me. I think he can play nickel too. Like you can put him all over the field. Like he's a guy that gives you a little bit more size in the nickel than Daquan Hardy. Play him inside in the dime. Bring in Cam Miller to figure out or to be the outside guy. Well, move Dixon inside. So his versatility really helps him as well. The question was about his ceiling. I mean, he's not going to be Kalen King. Like Kalen King is a special talent. I think Dixon can be very good, but we're talking about one of the top 3-4 corners in the country in Kalen King. So if you can have somebody in that atmosphere, great. Two more great corners. Terry Smith's done a great job there.
Nate, I want to come to you with this question. This is, as you always are, you're our big picture guy. This one from Chris Gorky says, what is the current 12-team playoff format, and how do you see it changing with no more Pac-12? This is coming in 2024 with basically the disillusionment of the Pac-12. Do you know how this is going to change the playoff format for next year? And is that still set in stone? Like, is that a part of the college football playoff that has a deal to make sure that that's still part of the landscape of the postseason?
Yeah. I don't know, honestly. I mean, I think certainly there are automatic champions, right? You've got with the dissolution of the Pac-12. Yeah, I think that that maybe changes things, but probably not. I mean, I'm looking at it right now. 12-team format will feature the top 4 conference champions, followed by some combination of the top 6 at-large bids and 2 ranked remaining conference champions.
Yeah, so it's just the Big 12. Like the Pac-12, they're gone. So now there's actually 4 conferences that you have to care about. There's no Power 5. Now it's 4. So it actually sounds like it fits a little bit better without that 5th conference. We don't have to worry about who's getting left out, what conference is getting left out this year. Fitz, I want to sorry, go ahead.
I was just going to say that, like, I'm reading a lot of questions that are related to divisions and conferences and playoffs and all of that stuff. And I truly believe all of this is extraordinarily temporary. This stuff that we think is going to happen. I mean, it's almost like the COVID years, right? Where it's just like, well, they're going to wing this for a couple of years, and then the dust will settle, and there will be something resembling normalcy, but it's going to be a new normal. I mean, they're not even committed for 12-team playoff past the next 2 years. It's the contract is only for the 24 and 25 seasons. So, 12 could be 16. There could be more automatic bids. There could be less, depending on how it works out. I think that you're going to see, there's the potential to see quite a few different things from what the expectations are right now.
I don't have a great Littlefinger impression, but I'm just going to say it straight and plain. Chaos is a ladder. So the next 3 years, if you can find a way to get in and you can take advantage of all of this stuff that's going on that's different, I think we've seen that in the past with teams that have been able to dominate a transition, and then in a 4-team playoff, you establish yourself as one of the 3 that's always there. And here you are, a decade or so later, and we have the narrative we have of the last couple of years. Got a Greg Pickell, I think it is. He says, "Hey, T. Frank, Sean, and Nate, long time, first time. Who will be the holder this fall? And do the Lions have a Manly Award winner at snapper? I'll hang up and listen." I'm going to hang up and listen as well. You guys do what you do talking about the snappers, and I'll be back with the next question in just a moment.
Well, we appreciate all of our viewers, even Greg. Holder is going to be one of those situations where I think it's interesting because you've got a left-footed kicker in Sahadak, you've got a right-footed kicker in Falcons, you've got different. The whole thing. I don't want to get into it, but the whole thing is different. Like the whole chain is different. Snapping is different, holding is different when you've got a guy on the other side. Duzansky, I think, is going to be the guy in terms of being a snapper. Riley Thompson was the first holder up yesterday. Dom DeLuca, who people just absolutely love Dom DeLuca. He was in there, and that's an intriguing one. I know obviously you have a linebacker there, but this kid was a hell of a player in Northeast Pennsylvania as a quarterback, won a state championship, state player of the year, etc. Gives you options to do fun things from a holder position. So interested to see that. I'm also interested to see if Bo Perbula plays into this, because he's been a guy that we've seen hold as well. So long answer to a short question. Yeah, I think those are the guys that we're going to see. I know there's more interest in kick return, punt return. So let's sorry, Greg, but let's move on. You didn't give us the super chat, so we're just going to move on.
Yeah, did Greg pay for that?
He did not. But he's paid for it with excellent work behind the scenes, helping me on the YouTube channel. So he put in his donation in a different way. Fitz, I want to ask you quickly. Just this is going to be a little bit of technical directing on screen. I apologize. Do you want to answer the question about King Mac that's in the chat? I don't want to. That's right on the border of something that we keep private, that we keep over at the BWI message board. And Michael, he's a regular. He donates, but I just want to make sure you're comfortable talking about that before I throw it up on screen.
Yeah, let's segue into that with John's question about true freshmen with the most snaps this year. I think that'll take us right into that. Tony Rojas is my pick for that. I think that's an easy answer. Like, it never works out like that, but like he's competing for snaps right now with DeLuca, the backup Sam. He's going to play a lot of special teams. I think he's one of those guys that is like a green light all the way type guy. We saw him yesterday with the second defense, and it makes sense. And it gives you the opportunity to be flexible with DeLuca, maybe play him at the will a little bit if you need to. Maybe eventually Rojas ends up over there as well, but like it gives you the ability to do that. It gives you the ability to put Curtis Jacobs at the will, maybe move Carter into the mic. And as you said, chaos. That seems like a very chaotic potential defense. So I'm going to go with Tony Rojas here, but I know that Matt Zenitz from On3 was talking to some people, and King Mac was a guy that came up. King is very talented, very athletic, and not the biggest guy in the world, but very talented and very athletic. I know Nate had some notes about him this weekend. In terms of expanding on it, there's only so much you can say after the first couple of days of practice, but they're excited about his playmaking potential, whether that be as a safety, whether that maybe eventually as a nickel guy, because he is smaller, but he also is very quick, very fast, has a lot of the skills that you look for in a nickel corner, or as a returner. The thing that I will say about this is he just got here. He just got here in June, or maybe it was late May. You don't want to throw too much at those freshmen too fast. Like, that's why the spring is so important. Enrolling in January is very important for these guys, because we talked about Smolik a little bit ago. You can throw a bunch of stuff, different stuff at them in spring. You get 15 practices. The thing that we forget about sometimes with these true freshmen, Mac, Dakari Nelson, the guy at Lions, the guys that just arrived, like, that's a big jump into your first practice. I mean, you're wide-eyed, you're looking around. These guys have been in this for years, following the routines, knowing where they're supposed to be on the field when the whistle blows without even thinking about it. That is such a big jump. And for the first week of camp, you're just kind of like starry-eyed and looking around like, this is big. This is big time things. So I expect when he gets a little bit more comfortable, maybe a couple weeks into camp, when they get into game prep, to maybe expand his role a little bit there. But so far, just you love the combination of, number one, high school production. Like, stats are overrated, but in terms of like what he was able to do as a high school defensive back and kick returner, punt returner, just kind of all around football player, that's notable. Size is not great in terms of height, but this kid is put together, absolutely put together.
Physical. He plays
it's
big.
so funny to put him and Dakari Nelson beside each other and say, hey, these two play the same position, because Dakari is 6'3", Dakari is just absolutely huge. Mac is a mini version of Dakari Nelson put together, but then he also runs a 4.3. So that helps, So I think Mac, the expectation is there for him to play. And I said it before, like those guys that you're bringing in from Florida, from Alabama, from all over the place with the transfer portal, keep them happy, keep them engaged, keep them in the game. And that might elevate their snap count as well. And then they get comfortable and they make your entire team better. So I think that's probably where I'm at with King Mac, extremely high on his potential. It's going to be tough for him to break into that safety rotation because they go too deep with four guys that have experience, that have had a bunch of snaps, and they're pretty good. So be interesting to see what happens there relative to Mac versus Mekhi Flowers, Tyrese Mills, some of the other young safeties. So I'm excited to see how that comes about. He's an exciting football player, and I think he's one of those guys. I mean, it's stereotypical to say that the Florida guy gives you an infusion of speed and infusion of this, but we've seen it, and it's happened before. So I'm excited to see King Mac develop.
Yeah, I know I've probably been fixating a lot on this, and you laid out a great game plan for what's likely to happen on third down. But I just keep seeing King Mac, and in my head, I'm like, that's a third down corner. That's a third down guy you want in underneath coverage because he's aggressive, he's smart, and he is so explosive. So, long term, that's a guy that I think has those skills as well in a specialty. And if that's how you want to get him on the field, I think that's an interesting way to get him on the field as well. Nate, I'm going to transition into this. Ryan Sheard, he says, gents, I'm late, but glad to be here. Hashtag we are, hashtag PSU. Ryan, a huge fan of Nate Bauer. Going to shift quickly into the comments section because on yesterday's video, one of the things we talked about was everybody's height, and nobody has been right yet. So if we want to go around the room, we can do this if you guys are comfortable. Fitz, I'm going to start with you. What is the measuring stick that they're comparing everyone and saying that we're all 5'5"?
I mean, you guys kind of look it like even when we were doing that split screen earlier, I was somehow taller than you guys, even though it's just an angle thing here. I don't know, Nate. What are you, 5'4"?
Stop. Being hurtful.
I'm not. I'm just,
Well, Nate, I wanna throw this up here because somebody says height. What about age? Sean looks a little frosty around the jowls, but Nate,
there we go.
Thinks you're young. He thinks you're the youngest one here on the show. Wow. Left to right, it was youngest to oldest. So your boyish charm is extending well beyond mine at this point as the one who is the youngest on the show by like 5 or 6 years. But no one got the height right, and everyone is way too low on me and Nate. So just wanted to clean that up from yesterday's show. And for Nate and myself, we'll keep that guessing game going or not. It might be too hurtful. We'll see.
As long as the comedy stylings are there, that's all that matters, is just the comedic aspect of me towering over you guys. And I know Greg's a tall guy too, but it's very funny to me. And that's just me looking down on you, literally, figuratively, whichever way you want to. And by the way, yes, there's frost here. It's roughly 7 and 9 years old, second grade and fourth grade. And I did not have this beforehand. So, and I'm also younger than Nate. So yeah, there we go.
That one I didn't know.
True. Yeah, that's true.
David here in the chat asks, for an upcoming show, can you please prepare graphics shows players who are changing uniform numbers in 2023? If I can see it, I can remember it. That's a great idea because Malik Mega out there wearing number 4, that confused me for a good practice and a half before I realized that the tall guy is still Malik Mega. Because there was a quick second I was like, that's not Dante Cephas. And that's something that I think we can definitely get for a future show. Steven says, thanks for another fine Monday morning. Great job on the weekend coverage. Thank you, Steven. Thank you for being here all weekend long and over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. Just want to remind you one more time, it's $1. This is your last day to get in for $1 and get 1 month of access to the site. Of course, you can subscribe here to the Blue White Illustrated YouTube channel for free, and you can like this video. Helps us out with all that stuff. That's it for the chat. Seems like we've got a complete breakdown of what we saw here from everyone in the chat. Got this last thing, Trey Potts. Everyone's sleeping on Trey Potts, according to Gil Alvarez. Any last thoughts as we get out of here? Any guys you want to mention? Anything from yesterday? Nate, we'll come to you, and then we'll end with Fitz.
Sure. Your Phil Troutwine story reminded me of something that happened with Anthony Poindexter throwing in between or around. I don't know what you're going to call them. The tall bags, like the bags, the tall ones that stand up. And Keaton Ellis was running through the line, and Poindexter's pass like ricocheted off of the bag and just way far away. And from maybe 40 yards away, you could hear Franklin say, "Catch it anyway, Keaton."
The level of expectation for those guys, and especially the top four, when you watch the safeties go through the line, the top four safeties looked like the top four safeties. And then when you got to the guys at the back of the line, the ball hit the ground quite a bit more. So the whole Tide turnover king from the spring, I actually believe it now watching all four of those guys catch the football.
Gumby could not have caught that pass. There was no human alive who could have picked that out of the air. But anyway, it was funny.
James preparing for the in-game thread for week 2. I'm sure.
Get it together.
Yeah. This is an embarrassment. Fitz, last thoughts.
Malik Mega is now number 4. Amin Vanover is now number 15, which has just completely messed with my mind. Going from 56 to 15 is crazy. Christian Driver now number 80. He's changed from 13, which I think they would have had 3 13s on the roster. So yes, those things will be crazy. We'll get T Frank to make a graphic for you. But number changes, man, that's where we're at. And otherwise, Penn State's got a pretty good football team. So excited to talk about that. We'll be back later this week, talk recruiting. Definitely check out BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. As I said, Nate put some notes up. I put some notes up. There's a lot of notes. Media Day is great. We get a lot of quotes. The story is more than quotes when we're talking about tracking Penn State football, tracking camp and things like that. Quotes will get you some, but the actual insight is good stuff. So I recommend you check that out on BlueWhiteIllustrated.com.
That'll do it for us today. We'll be back on Wednesday with our recruiting show. We'll have a mailbag over at BlueWhiteIllustrated.com. But, of course, you can come here in the live chat. We can hang out just like we did today. So, awesome show. Thanks to everybody who contributed. Many hands make light work, and this was a breeze for me to get through the show today. Navigating everything because you had awesome stuff. The guys on camera brought it. The guys in the chat brought it. And the ladies as well. Some of the I don't want to leave anybody out because I don't know everyone's screen name. Sometimes they're what do you call that? The nom de plume, or did I just ruin this? I'm just going to get out of here now. That's it for the show today. We'll talk to you on Wednesday.